Joining us right now is MS Now senior Capitol Hill reporter Ali Vitale, who's outside the hearing room. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, our international affairs analyst and former ambassador to Venezuela, James Story, and retired intelligence officer with the Navy Reserves, Mark Jacobson. He is now a senior fellow at Salve Regina University's Pell Center for International Relations. Ali, this hearing's now been underway for almost an hour and a half. Give us a little reset. What ground has been covered?
Well, we expected it to go about 2 hours, so we'll see if they end up staying on that schedule. Though, as Secretary Rubio said, one of the meetings he has this afternoon that might be a reason for having a hard out at this hearing is that he's meeting with the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. There was a long line of questioning between Rubio and several of the senators, but especially Senator Tim Kaine, about what the plan is for the future transition and for a small d democratic system to take root in Venezuela. This has been a consistent focus for lawmakers. I'll leave the foreign policy experts to handle the foreign policy, because to me, there's two things that have just been consistently coloring my lens in the way that I look at this hearing. The first is that Rubio is a known entity to these senators. Chris Coons made mention of this. Rubio served on this committee for 14 years. They know his public persona, but they also know his private view of the world and the way that he takes typically a more neoconservative, classical view of the world order. They also know that he's someone who's deeply steeped on Venezuela issues when it comes to Cuba, which hasn't come up yet, but is a question that they know Rubio could answer. They're aware of the kind of person that he is from a foreign policy perspective. And to that end, then, it reminds us of the second thing, which is that he is there now as an emissary of the Trump administration. And rule number one throughout all of these years of Trump administrations has been that you are really there performing for an audience of one. And so we're watching Rubio trying to balance these two things, and it was really jarring. This is a committee hearing that has had tense moments, but I think the biggest, most tense moment that we saw was just in the last few moments with Senator Tim Kaine pressing him on an issue around Trump talking about Iceland when he clearly should have been talking about Greenland, and Rubio very quickly retorted back, well, we know what it's like to have a president who stumbles, clearly referencing President Joe Biden there. Kaine said, nice try, tried to move along. But it's just one example of the ways that domestic politics, and when you are there performing on behalf of the Trump administration, speaking on behalf of the Trump administration, that kind of partisan rhetoric, it's rare in committee hearings like this one, because foreign policy is typically one of those areas where they try to keep the partisanship out of it as much as they can. Obviously, that's not something that's easy to do in this current environment, nor is it easy to do even for someone like Rubio, who has managed during this hearing to remain above the fray as he's been questioned by many of his former colleagues who know him quite well.
Yeah, I was actually struck, Ali, by how many tough questions he's been getting from Republicans who maybe want to support this administration, right? I mean, the last person we just heard from was Senator Rand Paul, who I think posed a question a lot of Americans are asking, which is, if someone invaded our country and took our president, would it be an act of war? Of course, Congress has the war powers, and this administration didn't even give Congress a heads up before capturing Maduro. So that was another pointed area of questioning and caught my ear, certainly. He said the definition of war is really important. And Rand Paul, again, a Republican, saying, I think we're in violation of the spirit and law of the Constitution. Ali, I'll let you go so you can keep listening for us. David, another thing we keep hearing come up over and over again is questions around the plan for the future of Venezuela, what's happening with the oil. It was a Republican senator who, John Barrasso, who asked about the oil blockade. He used the word blockade. Rubio quickly corrected him, saying it's a quarantine. It's not a blockade. He thought that was important. What's the difference there? And what did we learn about what's happening with the oil?
We learned very little. And what you're seeing is this tension where Congress has gotten very little information from an administration that's been very active around the world. Venezuela is one point. A blockade would be blocking all shipping going in and out. A quarantine is just select ships. And it's just a broader dynamic of, again, the America First president being so engaged in foreign policy that we're essentially running Venezuela for now. And what struck me is that Rubio's trying to explain this incredibly complex effort in terms of what the administration is doing around the world. So we've got Venezuela. We've got ships on the way to Iran right now. That's talks and maybe more bombing. We had this huge dispute last week with Europe over Greenland. The war in Ukraine, which President Trump is going to solve in a day, still continues. The Gaza situation has not been solved in that Hamas is still armed. We had drone strikes recently in Nigeria and Ethiopia, and the president has created a board of peace, which is sort of a de facto new UN. And you have Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, trying to explain all of this.
And he wears a couple of other hats, too, I believe. And I'm going, 30,000 feet here, but this is an incredibly active president who sends lots of different contradictory messages. Marco Rubio is trying to explain this strategy to the American people, and it doesn't make much sense. We're sort of lunging at one country and then the next country. And I think you see some of that tension in the questions today. Yeah, in fact, even on the issue of Greenland, he tried to, I think, reassure the senators and the American people about what's happening there, saying, quote, we're in a good place right now. He talked about technical discussions getting underway, saying, we have a process that's going to get something for everybody. We have a little bit to work on or work to do, but I think we're going to end up in a good place. Did he specify anything at all? Like, why should people just take their word for it?
No, there's no disclosure about any exact agreement in terms of what's going to happen in Greenland. And that's what Democrats are pushing on, that there should be more transparency. And Rand Paul is unique among Republicans, but he's saying this is really important. You're risking American lives. We've just, the Abraham Lincoln has just arrived near Iran. And one other point, we don't know how much this costs. Democrats said they've not gotten anything about the costs of, it could be $1 billion that have been spent on this deployment for Venezuela. How much will Iran cost? These are all basic questions, and it's Congress's fault. I'll agree, though. They have not been aggressive in oversight for years, some say decades. So I want to be optimistic. This is good. This is, American democracy at work, a co-equal branch of government pushing the presidency, pushing the administration to give answers.
Yeah, at least they're getting to ask questions at this point. We heard some frustration from Senator Merkley there near the end of what we were just showing, this part of the hearing where he says it's been months since the beginning of the actions against Venezuela, and we are just now getting to talk to you about this. Ambassador Story, as far as Venezuela goes, there has been a lot of tension in this hearing around the idea of Rubio trying to really make the case that Maduro was rightfully removed, that he was not the legitimate leader of Venezuela. At the same time, the U.S. is propping up Maduro's number two, Delcy Rodriguez. What did you make of that questioning and the answers he provided?
Well, thank you. It is good to see that we are finally having a hearing, and I appreciated the exchange between Senator Kaine and the Secretary on this point, with the Senator raising the fact that Edmundo Gonzalez won the election in 2024, basically forcing the Secretary to agree there, and that the leader was Maria Corina Machado of the opposition. What I do find interesting is that legitimacy does not derive from an illegitimate process. I think that's the point that the senator was making. I believe that the secretary did a fairly good job in laying out that this is not the end state. There was a reason here because of the issue of stability. But for me, the devil will be in the details that come forward. How long is it going to take for the transition to really get underway? He said that if we're here in 4 weeks and not doing better than we have done over the last 4 weeks, I'll come back and talk about it. This is something that we want to focus on. What I can tell you from the region, I'm here in Panama. There are 8 heads of state, regional heads of state at this International Economic Forum I'm attending. And I get the sense that people are glad that Maduro's gone. They recognize that he was not the legitimate leader of Venezuela, but they're all waiting to see about the next piece of this, the transition piece, the democracy piece. So I think it's really incumbent upon the administration to continue doing these hearings and laying out for the American people and for the region exactly what they intend to do and how this transition is moving forward.
Another notable piece of what we heard from Rubio was that he believes the administration or the U.S. will be able to open a diplomatic presence on the ground in Venezuela soon. That may be, glass half full thinking or kind of blue sky thinking, but he did kind of put that out there now as an expectation. Mark, on the other hand, he also said use of force is still on the table, if necessary, to ensure maximum control. The White House has intelligence teams on the ground, we know. What do you see as those use of force options?
Well, first let me say, as a former Senate staffer, And as David and Ali pointed out, this is a good hearing. There is real discussion. There's real debate, even when there's big disagreement, including over the use of military force. I think what Secretary Rubio said was very important, despite perhaps what we hear from the White House from time to time, that force is never off the table. Secretary Rubio laid out some very clear guidelines that not only is use of force something that the administration doesn't want to do, they are seeing it, or at least through his perspective, he's seeing it as a truly last option. We don't want to do this. We have other means of doing it. And if so, maybe it would be over a discrete issue. He kept referring back to an Iranian drone presence, perhaps in Venezuela might be a cause to do so. But I am less concerned about the lack of good military options. I mean, look, this is, again, they're getting hit for regime change and they're getting hit for not having regime change. We have been through 20 years of when we try and do regime change and nation building. And regardless of where people stand on it, the problem is it is hard. There's no guarantee of success. It's, and it is extremely costly. And in fact, this would be a great time to have an organization that's not the Department of Defense that perhaps could work on countries that are in need of development assistance, governance assistance, stabilization assistance. And as Secretary Rubio knows, we no longer have U.S. aid and that sort of capability. And that worries me over the medium and long term.